And I'll come off the mute to start this show. Welcome one, welcome all, wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. Another day to celebrate life and breath, manifestation, and moving through the Rubik's Cube that we call the Great Reset. You know, Ransom and I were talking before the show, and not only is this becoming a silly planet, the way that now we see different fronts of war opening up, which were once like, how's this even possible in this day and age? You got the BRICS with their new unveiling of a currency note of 100 brick note that sends shockwaves through the economic sphere. And now these countries talking about bringing silver on as another leg to their currency in addition to gold. But I had some strange experiences this week. I hope I can share a quick story. I'll tell you more about going off to buy the lamb today. I bought a 135-pound lamb from the Amish. They slaughtered it, and I've been butchering it part of the day. Been rendering down the fat and trying to get into that. We can talk about prices and thing. But I had the strangest thing. There was a guy I knew, respected the guy, a really smart guy, like incredible, intelligent. And he just sent me all these weird messages suddenly and calls me on the phone, like cussing me out almost. And because I didn't believe that the Maui fires were started by lasers and it was a land grab, and that they didn't create this hurricane and steer it completely right into the right direction to flood out North Carolina and Tennessee, that I didn't believe that full manipulation and full control of the weather is possible now with Dr. Evil across the planet using HAARP, which is an experimental facility, by the way. Now you can rent HAARP yourself from the University of Alaska if you want to. But because I didn't believe that, suddenly I'm an Anunnaki worshiper and some kind of other ridiculousness, that I'm a CIA plant because I don't believe all of this conspiracy so deep. And this is what's weird and scary about this is, like, people have lost their minds on both sides of every direction that it is being looked at right now. And we are in Planet Bizarro world anyway. But for somebody who I really thought was on a very stable level playing field of like really intelligent, right on ball, right on cue, to suddenly start getting angry at everybody in his Rolodex that doesn't agree that everything on the planet is manipulated. It's all controlled. Every single storm and disaster is to claim land. Everything is manipulated. We have the power to control the earth and make it move through space with engines on the back of it. If we just don't believe that, then somehow we are servants of the Anunnaki by saying that we don't agree with. And I personally don't agree that the tech is that advanced, that we can control everything on the planet. But anyway, that's kind of a weird week I've been having, in addition to all the beautiful leaves that are changing across the forests here in East Tennessee. It's just a splash of color everywhere you look. And yeah, how do we start the show tonight? I don't know. Are we mining for facts, Ransom, or what are we doing? Are we playing Rubik's Cube here in the Great Reset? You can see it all starting to coalesce into something big. This way comes the final show. I hope we're all sitting for Act 3, the finale, as we move through history. Thanks for joining me, Ransom. Oh, that would be helpful if I added him in. Excuse me. See, I'm having one of those days too. Add participant. Ransom, hang loose. I know you're listening on the other end. There you go. Here we are, joining in. See, that was a great intro. And then, if I would have had connected Ransom at the time, instead of trying to multitask over on this side here. But anyway, I see you joined the call, Ransom. No, he didn't. Unavailable. Why is Ransom unavailable? Ransom, unavailable. Participants, I'm going to join you in again here. Let's give him a call. Not on the call. Well, let's see what happens. Well, I guess I'm going to have to monologue until I can get him here. Unavailable, Ransom. So we have seen the introduction of BRICS nations just absolutely. Now, this is another thing that I've been following for many a time. Andy Schechtman from Miles Franklin and myself, we've had conversations many a time about the evolution of BRICS. And we saw this thing with the Arctic Century on how they're setting. This is my whole thing is seeing the new trade routes being set up along the Arctic Circle way outside any intervention of the U.S. Navy. The entire Russia-China sphere of the Arctic and those routes going down beyond the Kamchatka Peninsula, outside anything U.S. Navy involvement whatsoever for trade routes. And between these trading partners, it'd be so fast amongst the main trading nations to run the Arctic route. So Russia had been building up an enormous amount of nuclear-powered icebreakers over the last couple of years, like ridiculous amounts of commission. And also the tech evolution that they've been to allow people to come into really cold conditions, and like the evolutionary leaps of science just from the Russians trying to get cold weather problem solving of things that we never have solved before until this day and age, of how humans and machines and tires and rubbers and things that would just literally crack and break in such cold temperatures, they're overcoming that now because they understand setting up old trade routes along the Arctic is the way for the future forward. And I was talking about with Andy for a while, and we're talking Africa and setting up growing zones in these areas. And the BRICS nations are always front and foremost in those conversations. Not to completely replace the US dollar. Not going to be that. There's not going to be a full replacement where one day you wake up and there's no more US dollar. There is going to be a usurpage of it, where the total amount of which was 100% before, pretty much, you look at global history over the last 70 years, trade payments in dollars has dominated well above 90% for that entire time. But imagine if it shrinks down to 40%, 30%. And that's all that's used. The dollar remains, but it'll only be used in 30% of world payments from now. And what's shocking about this is the BRICS unveiled their new 100 brick note. Think of a 100 euro note, $100 bill. This is a 100 brick note, backed by gold, and now backed by silver. Now here's the scary thing for me. Game on, because the U.S. and the Five Eyes Western nations realize if they don't stop this right now by taking it to a global war, then the U.S. is absolutely going to lose its top position because they control money printing and reserve currency status. What we saw this last day was a coup that occurred financially across the planet. Now, as any coup, the first days, there's a lot of unknowns, communication cuts, disinformation, new leaders coming in power. Those that were old leaders were taken out of power. The reins have definitely shifted. Now, this caught everybody off surprise by unveiling the actual note. I'd seen a prototype of it. It looks pretty similar to what I'd seen last year, but it's not the same. It's a very different one. But to actually have a full printed one in the hand, and already they are printing these already. That's the thing. They've already gone into currency production. The presses are running on this. And I was so shocked to see it. I was caught off guard too. I was like, no way. You talk about just like knocking over the king on the chessboard. They're bringing out the actual new currency of the BRICS in 100 brick notes already. And I'm like, wait a minute. Now, who's backing that? Where's the gold backing on it? Who holds the currency? But it's a basket for those 5 nations. And this paper money is backed by gold. It's a redeemable gold certificate already in print. The ZIG is going to be the add-in for this. Is the Zimbabwe gold-backed reserve currency. These southern African nations are starting to do a lot with gold. So we've seen something so significant that this is literally going to be a financial earthquake that is resetting our planet. So if you saw India and Russia and China start to talk about using silver and palladium as another base of that monetary exchangeability, gold, silver, palladium, and obviously platinum is going to be in there at some point. This is the reason that silver went up $5 in a single day from yesterday's announcements. So this movement forward, solar panels are going to get far more expensive. Your batteries and anything that you use, especially these new solid state batteries that use a full 32 ounces of silver per one battery that can charge. And at Ransom, I forget how many minutes it was, 6 minutes or 9 minutes or 12 minutes, something like this. Those take 32 ounces of silver. But with this going to be a reserve currency base metal included in those PGMs, I don't know. It's going to take the price of silver well over $200. Not financial advice, not financial advice, but just trajectory over 4,000 years of history of the gold silver ratio through time. And Ransom, while you got off the mom, I'm glad you joined us. Let me send you this picture of gold and silver ratios through history. From the Greek era until just very recently, it's always been between like 15 to 1, 10 to 1, 9 to 1, 5 to 1. Right now, it's like around 87 to 1. So with the gold price running up 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 in the future, silver at even a 20 to 1 is still going to price in at, even if it's 10 to 1, we're looking at significant gains here. And all these products that we own and use that require silver for manufacturing are going to get so prohibitively expensive. I don't know. I think the green revolution is now done because the price of silver will stop that in its tracks alone. And the world shifts again. Ransom, thanks for joining. I see you got on the line there.
Yeah, sorry. It wasn't a connection problem. I'm just blind, and I was looking at the other computer, and I kept hanging up on you, wondering why I wouldn't connect. And then I realized I was hitting the wrong button. Yeah, but I did catch all of what you said. And it is a silly planet. I was just showing headlines across the way. So there's people in the background of society right now that are taking the world very seriously, and they're not being silly about it. And you were just alluding to it about the prices of real valuables in the Earth system. They're getting very valuable right now. So if you got gold, silver, any of that, and that indicates to me that people are preparing for the crash. I mean, just that alone, right? A lot of people are buying it too. And I'm just looking, I was laughing about what you were first talking about let's get down to earth for a minute. How much power does man have really? I mean, I guess the problem out there is that people on one hand don't believe in global warming. I'm one of those people. I don't believe that man has the energy production or power to create, manufacture the weather. Like they just don't have that much power. Like there's no human on Earth that can create the power of like a lightning storm per se. And on the map, that's really, really small. And this idea of moving these giant hurricanes, like we didn't even really get into specifics because we were joking around on the Tim Pool show. But if you watch that, one of those spots you pulled up the slide that showed how much energy is actually in a hurricane. And like people don't understand that. So if you understand that you cannot, or if you agree that man cannot create that energy, you cannot also believe in global warming. I mean, you cannot believe in both things, right? Either we have enough power to move a hurricane, in which case there is a breakaway civilization separate and apart from human beings, and that there's no one or no power on Earth that we've seen visually or learned about or anything that has that much power. And there's just this other civilization with futuristic tech and, way beyond anything that we can imagine. So you would have to imagine that to believe that they could move a hurricane. So some people do believe that, but it's just not likely. So how much power does man have? Well, I don't believe that they have enough power to control the climate. Especially in the way that they're perpetrating in the climate hoax, the climate scam. Trying to tell you that, matter of fact, I was looking at a video earlier that was a climatologist talking about an ice core, and he was pointing out how hot it used to be, and then this continual line that went down into like the Pleistocene and how it was warming up a couple times, but not really compared to the drop-off of coolness. And then he points to this little spot at the end of the graph, which is now. And he says, and actually it's not now, it's just when we started recording weather. And, without saying it, he debunked the entire thing. I mean, it was just, it's a hilarious clip. But we're not controlling that, and somehow they're trying to convince people, maybe through like psyops, that they can, and that's where some of these things come from. And then on the other hand, that sets them in a position to make you believe in man-made global warming. I mean, it's as simple as that. If they can convince you that, there's a secret organization that's controlling the weather, or maybe not so secret, but that the governments are controlling the weather, then you would fall into the trap of believing man-made global warming and climate change. That's kind of, like a straightforward thing there. You cannot believe, on one hand, that global warming from man-made activity doesn't exist, and then on the other hand, believe that they can steer hurricanes. So I don't know. It's just people are going to get mad if you don't believe. But this is how weird our planet is. Superhuman AI could tell you exactly when you're going to die. That's kind of a new one. America's oldest person dies at 115. And then, people are discussing letting out the Menendez brothers. If you've been around in America forever, you know what a big deal that was back in the day when that was all over the television. And now we're talking about, oh, yeah, let's let them out. An Italian surfer gets impaled by a swordfish. I mean, what are the odds on that? Right? We're fighting in courts whether or not to let elephants decide where they want to live. AI is now telling us how happy the pigs are, and this is just kind of anecdotal stuff, but I'm pointing out that every little aspect of the human opinion or science or anything is now being headed up and led by AI. You can't even Google something now without its AI take on what it thinks you're looking for, or a breakdown of what the official narrative is, right? In New York, they're debating on whether or not to let you off work, if your animal's sick, time off for sick animals. Can you imagine that? What does a farm worker think about that idea? You know what? The pig's kind of sick. The AI told me the pig wasn't feeling well and wasn't happy, so I'm gonna take the day off to deal with it emotionally, and go hungry in the process. But anyway, ballots are being torched. I mean, like the whole joke of democracy going on when we live in a republic, and then while everyone's distracted with this election, I don't know how it's going to turn out, and how good things will be one way or the other. But what I do know is that the conglomerate of nation states is ready to have some die off. I mean, it's no more. You can't really debate it. I mean, their programs are anti-human. They want to stop farming, stop food production, and on the other hand, we're gonna, say that, the voting's messed up because cyber attacks and AI. And at the same time, most people think that there's going to be some kind of conflict, despite all of the things thrown at the American people over time, and have never taken the bait. And I doubt they will this time. But, there's, and then on the other stage, everybody's about to realize that we're still in the Korean War, that it never ended, and now they're ramping it back up. South Korea warns it's going to send, some help over to the Ukrainians, weapons for them, because, North Korea sent some troops to Russia. So this is that thing that we were talking about last year, where the nations start lining up based on the currency that they use, and then it just starts shatter belting from there. People start taking sides. Then we have names being thrown around, like the Allied forces and the Axis of evil and the whole thing. It's just a rerun of World War II, and we're going in it face first, and getting smacked by everything on the way in there. Huge fire at U.S. military base in South Korea. I'm sure that has nothing to do with anything. And if you've seen a map of, all of the money moving around, you'll see that China's dumping money into, Russia, and India's putting money into Russia. They're sending troops for North Korea. Other countries are sending stuff. So the financial war is ongoing right now. So they're building it up for some kind of event very, very soon. It may even be like right at election time. It seems like that's what they're steering it to me, is to have some kind of super conflict that really convolutes um, people's perception of reality in the coming year. And it's probably going to start with this election, which they're already telling us is going to take 13 days to 2 weeks to decide, despite having computers doing a lot of the work, and despite every other nation on earth seeming to get their elections done in a day. I don't know. You could take that however you want, and that's where the conspiracy theorists always, split from facts. I try to find facts. So if a story comes out, I'm already wondering, what's the problem with this? Who created this story? Where did the content come from? Where did they get their facts from? Is that actually how it happened when it happened, or is this a description of someone's opinion about the way it happened? And opinions now seemingly are mainstream, verified, fact-checked news. Meanwhile, facts are sometimes relegated to the conspiracy theorist corner. So I can see why people have problems splitting the two ideas apart. And right now, it seems like in the U.S., we have a bunch of tinfoil hat people are going to go vote against, or even with people with blindfolds on, that say things like, I choose not to believe, or, I trust the science, even though, we all know the problems that go down the line of the new idea of trusting the science is actually turning your back on all the fundamental philosophies of science, including doing your own research, because, they've also mentioned how dangerous that is.
The blind foil hat. Oh, that's a new one, man. Use that. You can use that one. But it is
Already made the artwork for exactly that.
the blind foil hat. Get ready, Dr. Zeus, to see where this one takes us. Ay, ay, ay. Yeah, that is the kicker. We talk about sea level change here for just a second, because I was watching Randall Carlson on Patrick Bet David, because Ransom and myself are in queue to get on Patrick's show. So we went up to Tim Pool. That opened a couple doors for us in terms of people seeing us on a larger venue, and also being able to talk about some of these different subjects that we can connect the dots on that make a wider picture. And this is what Patrick's all about, is seeing a wider picture, macro and micro both, like connecting dots that seem unconnected, and then scoping out into a wider tapestry. And you're like, wow, that makes sense after, several dots are connected. But I was watching him with Randall Carlson, and, I'm just going to, say some of the same things that Randall's talked about. And I have also, read several a paper on this. We could talk about the Younger Dryas era, where, at that point, during the Ice Age, coming out of the Ice Age, sea levels were 400 feet lower than they are today. And during that very short, less than 1,000-year period, sea levels rose 400 feet. And here we are today, it's going to raise, 6 inches or a foot in the next century. That is not sea level rise. Sea level rise and a catastrophic civilization end, 400 feet. That's not long ago. That was 10,000 years ago, 10,300, 10,700 years prior. That is not millions of years in the past. That is literally yesterday in geologic terms, or even seconds ago. So these vast changes that have occurred, what is it that a lot of people don't understand about the cyclicity, or the way that things change on a cycle? It gets warm, it gets cold, it gets warm, it gets cold. And this is within this 10,000 years, there's been several of these events where there's spikes in heating, medieval warming period, Roman warming period. And if we go back, there's areas of cooling plunge, like the 8.2 K, it was 8,200 years prior, direct plunge down some 4 degrees Celsius. And again, civilization, I'm not going to say got wiped back, but it definitely got squeezed toward the equator, and the population dropped off tremendously from the survivors that had 2,000 years to pick up the pieces after this sea level rose, and they established new shorelines. Okay, you know where the new shoreline is. Your climate patterns are sort of stabilized, where you understand at least pretty much this season it's going to grow something. Not like today's wiring it in on the planting and harvesting by within a week or so, but they just come out of a cataclysmic event with the cometary ice, with an impact on the ice sheet that just crushed our planet. And then we had that massive drop at 8.2K years ago, and then boosh, back up again. And there's been this warming and dropping periods. A little ice age is another drop off. Massive, massive effects on the planet. So the very few people understand these events that have occurred just even in the very, 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 very recent past. We're not asking you to go back 65 million years, but that's what a lot of people point at, is they always try to get you into these really long time frames of the dinosaurs went extinct. Okay, great. What about the mid-Holocene flip of what is now the driest places on our planet in the Middle East and North Africa were forests with rainfall? Okay, and that's less than 6,000 years ago. Well, that's very recent. We talk about the Greeks and the Romans and the Sumerians and the Hittites. Damn, that's inside that time ballpark right there. And somehow nobody even understands that that's not taught widely. We had entire continents flip precipitation patterns. And by the way, I was reading a paper. Damn, I wish I would have saved it on and had it up here on my browser right now. It was about what they've done, an inverse correlation of what we're seeing right now. The Amazon seems to go on to a drought phase for 200 to 300 years. But at the same time, North Africa and the Middle East onsets to a wet period. Now, these are interdispersed with longer period cycles as well. So when they're talking about multi-thousand year cycles in the I would say modal time of, let's say, middle point of this warm period we're at between glacial periods. Like within that, there's cycles as well, much greater cycles. So are the maps we're seeing and all these maps that we have in history where it shows green deserts, does it only really take 200 to 300 years for something to flip like that? And we're being lied to our entire history here that, it took 4,000, 6,000 years for that to change one time. But I tell you, I have seen many an ancient map, and they all show green across these same areas in the 1400s with lakes and rivers, estuaries, kingdoms. Everywhere it's desert now. But, some 400, 500 years later, it's dry. So I'm wondering if the time history that we're also being taught is fictitious in terms of how quickly climate can change. Because I understand a little about CO2. I understand a little about water vapor. And I have dabbled into the solar activity. So this overlap on these three right here also, not widely talked about. But I would encourage anybody to go to Sislo and take a look at this massive spike we've had in solar activity, and then look at the temperature charts on the planet that run in tandem with the massive spike in solar activity. And we had this massive spike in heat, global temperatures, but at the same time, we had the Hunga Tonga eruption go off, which put up a vapor canopy over our heads. And that has so much more power to heat and trap heat than the gas does. It's water vapor. So now we got these three natural things happening. We got the solar activity, can't control that. Can't control the Tonga eruption volcano that was the largest water vapor eruption in human history just 2 years ago. Did you hear about that? Do you wonder why there's so many rainstorms coming down now? All that water starting to come out of the atmosphere. And, our atmosphere was before 100% of water. That eruption put 14% more water into the atmosphere. So you're talking about almost 15% more water in a system that is now coming out. And that 15% also has the potential to trap heat. So now we got increased solar activity, just off the hook, ridiculous. Nobody it blew everybody away. They're baffled how it is so ramping up. I attribute it to the sputtering of an engine that is running out of gas. You get that last vroom, and then you're done. This is where we sit. One last piston move, of fired fuel, and then the sun's going to go back into, well, the beginning of its dormant period, otherwise known as an ice age. Will it happen tomorrow? No. Is it going to step down in our lifetimes and get cooler? Oh, yeah. But see, how are they going to milk that? And see, Ransom and I talked about this on Tim Pool's show. They're going to have to take credit for cooling the environment, geoengineering, cloud seeding. And see, once you give them this power, that they're all omnipotent and they can control storms, they can steer storms, they can do all these things with weather fronts. Once you give them that power, you have given them your power. You've given them your power. Because you're saying that they can control it. Oh, look at the control they've done. They made the planet cool, although it's a natural cooling. They can steer the weather. They can bend the weather. Oh, we have to give them trillions of dollars a year, hundreds of billions, if not a trillion, to keep the planet stable. And lockstep, right to the global tax. If you give them the power to believe that they are so powerful that they can manipulate every weather system on the planet. And I've heard some, Ransom, I'd like you to respond to this one. I have heard just recently, maybe you've heard it too. They said now that if they stop all weather modification programs on the planet, that the entire ecosystem was collapsed because every event is man-made. Every weather front, every thunderstorm, every jet stream flow, every wind pattern, every fog bank is all related to human-produced weather systems based on cloud seeding and geoengineering. And I'm like, that's truly insane. There is no way on the planet that this nonsense can be talked about, where it is every single, you can't stop any of these programs because literally every wisp of wind is human created. And if we stop this, somehow the planet's going to destroy itself. See, they've already got you hook, line, and sinker if you start believing this. Because they can't stop. Oh, I know it's nefarious, but we can't stop, Ransom. The planet's going to, look, they're not going to be able to grow food. Oh, the whole system's going to go out of whack. No, if everybody stops, then, oh no, the jet streams, everything's just going to collapse on itself. Oh, we're going to have a climate cataclysm. We got to keep the programs going. I know it's bad, Ransom, but we got to keep it going. We got to save the planet. Just pay them every single year from now on. I mean, are you hearing the same thing?
Yes, it's an obvious God complex. And if they can convince you that they're God, then you'll worship them in any way that you can, which in our era is through money. And you'll throw your money and your wealth and your children's future away to them to save this concept. It's obviously a scam. When you were talking, I was showing this picture that shows 100,000 years before present to now. And when you look at the global climate temperatures, they go up and they go down, and then they go up again and they go down again, and they go up and down, and they go at an irregular pace, but it is a pace. It's like a heartbeat. It just keeps happening over and over again. And we can see that happened. And you look at, even in the peaks, there's a lot of little ups and downs, and even on the trough, there's a bunch of up and down. So even in the small scale, there's a bunch of up and there's a bunch of down, which means it got hot, it got cold. It got hot, it got cold. It got hot, it got cold in very small time increments. But you can also see that there's not really a pattern, but there is a pulse of it going extremely hot and then extremely cold over and over and over again. And this chart shows all of the other hominids that were alive and existing, and they lived through all of this, and the temperatures went up and the temperatures went down. But if you look at the last little part of the graph, it shows us, and we're in this little tiny green band. And at the top of it, it expands that out to show basically all of what we call today's Homo sapien history, the hybrid species that is alive today on the planet. Their history really, I mean, as far as we know, of course, you and I and other people realize that there's plenty of evidence to say it's older. But let's go with the mainstream even narrative. All of that's in the last 10,000 years, right? Everything. The Industrial Revolution is at the very end, and you can see that the peak that we're on of this interglacial that we're on has been going up and down for the last 10,000 years, a lot. Like there's a lot of little peaks and valleys on just that little part, but it's overall on a peak of an interglacier. And if you look at the whole pattern there, if there is like a pattern to the pulse there, you can see that right after that peak, it gets cold for like 10,000 years or more, sometimes longer. Like really cold, like back, stuff that we've never lived through. And it can also go back high. If you see on the last peak, there was an extreme peak, and that was near the end of Homo neanderthalis and Homo erectus off the planet. And now we have evidence that Denisovan or some other archaic human might have lived all the way up until 15,000 years ago to the, when we switched over to the Holocene. But this right here on its head is the whole picture that the majority of everybody with an opinion about saving the planet doesn't get, doesn't know, and is completely oblivious to that. And guess what? Homo erectus and them guys back there weren't driving their SUVs around. They didn't have nuclear plants. They didn't have the Industrial Revolution. They didn't have none of that, and it got a lot hotter during their era multiple times before they went extinct. And then we're here at the very end, at the last of the race, and people are crying about something that they have no idea what they're talking about. It can get extremely hot right now in the next decade, the next 2 decades. It could get extremely cold. Both of those are very possible, judging by just the past 100,000 years alone. And even in a micro scale, the last 10,000 years, it's been up and down, quite variable, even in the last 10,000 years. But overall, we've been living in the good period for like 10,000 years at the peak of a warm peak, that should have allowed us to expand and have a lot of life. But we know that things change and they do get extremely cold, and that can happen immediately, or it could take 10,000 years. And people just don't get that. It's like they don't understand the amount of energy that's in a superstorm flowing across the planet. Like, how much area does that actually cover? How much energy is actually in the ocean being transferred around to the sky, interacting with all of the solar, particles that are coming down, interjecting with the whole system? I mean, it's so complicated. I could see why people would get a headache, but to just blindly follow or trust, a source, and not even compare like the rest of history is silly. And that's at the point we're at. Everything is being boiled down to a childlike version that for people to believe in, as far as history, facts, anthropology, science. What they want is low IQ worker bees and people that will just accept any authoritative structure that's given to them. And that's what's about to be on the other side of this reset. So the temperature really is the last of our concerns, considering over all of this time, the peaks and valleys of the extremes, the hominid species has come through to right now. I mean, and unless something like like you were mentioned 65 million years ago happened, then that would be a different story. And then we'd really be talking about scarce resources and no food to eat and crops not growing and all of that stuff. Or say 3 volcanoes pop off. We don't even know what the trigger is for these things to go up and down. We just know it's some kind of interplay between our planet, the other planets, and the sun. The sun's pulse, that it keeps going up and down, getting hotter, getting cooler, getting active, getting inactive. And people on Earth are still, like worried about things they're watching on antenna and cable TV. Who shot Nellie in the belly with the meatball? Did Kamala really work at McDonald's? They're not even thinking about the food they're eating, much less the politics that runs the world they live in, or the overall lack of power that those people actually have over control over the earth and the environment and the sun and all that. Meanwhile, they're trying to convince people that they are gods, literally. And I think this has happened over, over and over again throughout time as we're looking at this graph, where people that would claim to be God and claim to be, the master of the universe and control things, also that you will give your trinkets, your labor, and your time over to them while you exist on the earth.
Yeah, I sent you a couple images over there through Skype, the North Africa changes. I want to read a couple comments here. H. Johnson, 8225, thank you for throwing your idea. If weather modification wasn't real, why does the United Nations have weather modification treaties? Okay, we never said it wasn't real. It's the vastness and all-encompassingness, if that's a word, that would be possible with it. I absolutely believe in cloud seeding. I know for sure that they use carbon black and different types of graphene. Hyperelectric graphene, or hyperconductive is another way to term that, graphene, to seed into the top of some of these hurricanes to cause a collapse of an eye wall in a certain section to make it move. I'm not disputing that at all. Controlling it from the minute there's a possibility of a low forming and then going that far out into the ocean, or this whole thing, like they've created everything for the last 12 months. Every cloud that's ever been on the planet was human created to go put the perfect conditions in to create this low, and they knew it was going to be there 12 months in advance, so they've been planning for it, and they seeded it and they grew it from scratch and steered it into this place on purpose. That's an entirely different thing than saying, yeah, there's weather modification. I get it. If you're living in Dubai, do you want somebody pushing silver iodide to make it rain over your country in Qatar or in Saudi Arabia or Oman and flooding it out? What if you're in Liechtenstein? What if you're in Switzerland? Do you think you need a treaty for like Germany not to cloud seed and, geoengineer a huge storm onto your place? I believe they have the technology to do very, very, very minute areas. But if you ever looked at these hurricanes and widened out the earth during these even massive hurricanes, it is literally a tiny dot on the face of our planet. So the amount of power that would be used in there too. So I do believe that in this UN weather modification, but I believe that geoengineering is real, possibilities, but not to the capability to control the entire planet and supercharge these storms to steer them to within a few miles of their, proposed destinations. I'm not on board with that at all. Just not. Small programs, yeah. Large, controlling every weather system on the planet, no, not even close. I don't know, Ransom, what do you think about that?
I think that's exactly right. The problem is people are having trouble understanding scale.
Scale, that's it.
Yes, modifying a small storm front, and I mean small, like miles across, has been proven that they could possibly, because they have no evidence, because they don't know whether or not that thing was going to rain or not prior to that. It could have rained anyway before they seeded. So they can't even make a front in the first place. They can't make a storm. What they can do is drop particles off in an already formed storm to try to make it rain more or sooner than it was going to. The problem is they have no idea when or where it was going to rain in the first place. So they literally have no data to support the fact that that works. The fact that they're doing it is something else. They are doing it. They've been doing it since, 40s, 50s. We discussed that. The Ho Chi Minh Trail is a famous thing, and it seemed to work, but yet, again, they didn't know whether or not it was going to rain or monsoon that hard in that area already. They did know that it was going to rain because they had to have a storm front to try to modify. And that's the problem with that. Does it work? We actually don't know, because there's no way to know how much the same storm in the same circumstance was going to have precipitation in an area, any given area in the first place. That data is unobtainable. So there's no way to compare whether or not when you spray something in there that it worked better or flooded more or rained more or did anything more than it was already going to do. Disrupting it's a different thing. I think that they can measure evidence of disrupting something a little more than guessing how much or more or less it rained in a cloud that they sprayed some garbage into. And like that's why everybody was laughing at Trump talking about using a nuke to blow up a hurricane because the circumference of the nuke is tiny in comparison to the hurricane. This kind of goes over to the flat Earth thing too. I mean, people are all like, "Where's the curve? I was up in the plane, I didn't see a curve." Well, for one, you're not high enough, and for two, you're trying to equate something like a bacteria on the surface of a basketball being able to observe the curve of the basketball. It's impossible, for one. And when you see those little camera views, they're warped, they're fisheyed, and they have to be at a super altitude to even get anything in the first place. And you're not seeing but a fraction of the amount of the Earth. Like people are not equating the scale of the camera, the person, the satellite, whatever it is, with the scale of the Earth. And the same thing with these storms. I'm sorry, it's that like the science is just not there unless you're willing to admit that there's a breakaway civilization that's like well past a type 1 civilization, and they have stuff they're not sharing at all. And in that case, okay, then we could start talking about that. Like there's people on the internet right now that believe that the government is hiding and controlling wormhole technology, but they also don't believe in man-made climate change. So on one hand, they're believing that the governments of the earth have enough enormous power to open a wormhole, but also don't believe that man-made global climate change is possible because we just don't have the energy potential or any of that to be able to do that. You see what I'm saying? You can't. You either believe this fantastical thing or you just can't because there's no evidence to support it.
Yeah, I was talking with Jim Lee over at Climate Viewer. So Jim, thanks for spending your valuable time and chatting with me. He spoke to me 3 times to try to guide me and give me some resources to really explain this because, this is actually a pivotal turning point of our world as well. Like this debate that's dividing people of they're controlling every single weather system to no, they don't have the technology at that scale yet is just as divisive as you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're vaxxed, you're not, get out of my house. I'm telling you, it's the exact same thing. And they've just driven that wedge in. So he sent me to a history of cloud seeding page here. And if you go over to climateviewer.com, history of cloud seeding, check this one out here. So James Pollard, SB, and this is in 1785, had worked with the Forestry Service for quite some time and had proposed burning forests to increase rainfall. So he understood updrafts and sending particulates up to. But again, was a storm coming in? Was it a high front? Was it a low pressure system? We don't have those kind of, they didn't have that satellite data that we do now, or even just weather balloon data that we do now. But think about that. That was the very first crack at doing something in what we consider now geoengineering or cloud seeding, was burning forests to increase rainfall. Because, there's another famous thing too. And I'd, been over in China during Chinese New Year and Taiwan during Lunar New Year. And every time an enormous amount of fireworks goes up, it rains after. Like every time, and I don't know if you've experienced it in the States, but when there's a huge fireworks display across, tri-city areas or whatnot, it usually will rain. But in China, it's all encompassing. I tell you, there's just the most fireworks you've ever seen, especially Hong Kong going off. And I mean, it is a fireworks bonanza, and that's really the understatement. I mean, people wait the whole year for that to shoot off displays, and whole towns and villages get together, and the cities do it, and people in their houses. It's just crazy amount of fireworks going off. But it rains every single time. If you're going to go out for like Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year, bring a raincoat because it rains directly after that. Because all that stuff's up there. Give it an hour or so, a couple hours. But I wanted to come back to this guy, Charles Mallory Hatfield. He had a patent for something called the moisture accelerator. Take that with you out to the bars, I guess. Mallory Hatfield um, started to produce rain in 1902. He had a secret mixture. Here's the thing, of 23 chemicals. There we see that number again, 23. So why was it 23 chemicals, not 22, not 20, not 24? And he said these chemicals attracted a rainfall. So the city of San Diego paid him because they were suffering from a drought miserably, and they paid him to come and produce rain. Well, whatever he did ended up causing a flood, and Lake Morena was apparently overflown. Or wait, excuse me, let me retrace that. They did a song about it in 1916. So he had caused floods that damaged part of the city's infrastructure. So the city tried to sue him instead of paying him for producing the rain. But my whole thing is, all right, perhaps he knew the rain was coming at that point. The drought was breaking anyway, and to be able to cloud seed or 23 chemical seed in front of a front coming in, that makes perfect sense to me to do something like that. But to create it from literally thin air, you got a drought going for 3 months, and one day you wake up and go, okay, today's the day. Again, people understand there's a lot of intuitive people that feel the energy change of fronts coming in front of them. So was he part intuitive? That was sort of they always have something like dog whisper, but he's a weather whisperer. I mean, that's not without the realm of possibility. There's a lot of people who can feel the electric charge of different systems coming in days in advance. Insects too. If you're to study the insect kingdom or the animal kingdom, you would know that their patterns changed, especially if you got a 3-month mega drought in California. And see, this is the craziest thing. They keep telling us it's the driest period ever. Well, in 1902, obviously it was incredibly dry because it was drought for 3 months straight. And they were like, it's never going to rain again in 1902. Okay, so we can see this cycle coming back. It's about a 100-year cycle, all right, 110-year. But if you were to be observant of the animal and insect life, and you had known this, and that was just kind of one of the things, you're always outside and studying and thing, that you would know preceding a weather front coming in on a rainstorm, this kind of caterpillar always did this thing. This type of lizard always did that thing. Now imagine stacking these things on top where you're weather intuitive and you're a keen observer of nature, and that's your secondary clue that your intuitiveness is actually on the mark. It's on the money because now nature's backing up. So you would look for secondary clues to then validate what you were feeling or sensing. And then suddenly as this tech, okay, well, that makes more sense than dude just shooting up stuff and it suddenly rained. There's something about this weather that seems that, I don't know. It seems that it is available to do it in certain areas. Now, see, here's the whole thing. If he was able to do this, and if it was such an all-encompassing effect by such a minute amount of particulates released in the atmosphere, it shouldn't have just rained in San Diego. Entire southern Florida or California should have been flooded, not just a tiny little part of one town. You see how the scale of it again. And he shot umpteen how many rockets. It doesn't say exactly how many rockets he had thrown up in the atmosphere there, but by today's standards, it would have been at least one plane full of barium, strontium, and aluminum particulates. Okay, that's kind of old stuff, by the way. If you haven't put 2 quarters in the time machine and come up to 2024, carbon black and graphene, hyperconductive graphene delivered above 50,000 feet is the new dig. Now, perhaps that's because there's a huge amount of moisture up there now because of the Hunga Tonga eruption, that they've evolved in their possibilities of creating or dissipating weather fronts. Now, apparently an enormous amount of this cloud seeding now is not taking place at the lower atmospheric levels where you can see it. Because if there's a plane at 50,000 feet, you're not looking at it. And if it's dispersing something that's black and not white, you're not going to see it either. Especially at that height, if it's blending in with the clouds. We're going to come right back. David DuByne right here with Ransom Godwin. We're going to talk more about the weather.
It's unknown if early man knew they would be the progenitors of great civilizations, or if they knew when their empires would fall and disappear into history. Fortunately for us as modern man, we can recognize that we are at the precipice, a point in history where we can see the cycle changing. Where we go from here is up to us.
How do you feed your families when the shelves are empty, the stores are shut, and there's no food available? What is the fastest, easiest, and most productive foods to grow? What is the quickest way to get somebody who has no skills at all up and running and producing very quickly? If you understand that we're at a point in history where it is no longer optional to be growing your own food, if you're like really freaked out and concerned because you've never grown food before and you don't have any skills, you don't know how to do that, but you know how important it is, then I want to let you know, however you stumbled here, you're in the right place. My name is Marjorie Wildcraft. I'm the founder of the Grow Network, and I have been the female leader in the survival and preparedness space for the last 20 years.
How to grow lots of food, even if you have no experience, are older and out of shape. This is for people who want the fastest and easiest ways to produce healthy and delicious meat, eggs, and vegetables. Because you know that growing your own food is like printing your own money. During this webinar, you will get status of global food shortages, how long the crisis will last, how much space you need to grow food, easiest, highest calorie foods you can produce, a complete plan for producing all the food you need, how to get started today, regardless of season. Marjorie will show you the fastest, easiest, and simplest ways to produce calories and nutrition, especially in a crisis and/or grid-down situation. The assumption is that you have no experience and you need to start producing food immediately. The most popular part of the webinar is the Q&A session at the end. So please come prepared with your questions.
Pro Clear Cleanse is the most powerful spray cleaner on the market today. No elbow grease necessary. Pro Clear Cleanse cuts through grease and grime like a chef's knife. Finally, the one cleaner that can do it all. Powerful surfactant cleaning technology cleans ovens, glass, porcelain, even polished wood. Environmentally friendly, less packaging and waste with no harsh smells, pet safe, child safe. 5 tablets equals 1 bottle of traditional cleaner. It's 5 months of cleaning for a fraction of the cost. Behold the grease-erasing power of Odor Crush. Simply drop a tablet into your bottle of warm water and shake it so it is evenly diluted. Spray the surface you want cleaned. Let set longer for tougher grease. Take a paper towel or a reusable cloth and wipe. Done and done.
Howdy, partner. You know people are having dinner and the smart ones are eating beef. Let me tell you a brief history, or more accurately, a beef history of dinner. Domestication of cattle happened around 8000 BC, but that's not when beef became what's for dinner. We've been eating beef since times before history. The earliest cave paintings have beef eloquently depicted on the walls. Those cave drawings of the hunt were for the aurochs, a primitive bovine. That's right, beef. Like I said, people are having dinner now, and the smart ones, well, they're eating beef. Americans want great food today, but we also want to have great food to eat if things go south in a hurry. Unlike most companies that take the cheapest, worst parts of the cow, then turn them into beef crumbles, whatever that is, they freeze-dry them in hopes that their customers will never actually try to eat it. Our premium beef cubes are sous vide, freeze-dried, and ready to be eaten right now, or in a decade from now. We want you to eat our beef now, so you can buy more. Prep with steaks, not with beef crumbles. This is a high-quality product. It's all American beef and 100% natural. None of that craziness of lab-grown meat and mRNA jabs. Our beef has a shelf life of 10+ years. This is high-quality cooked and freeze-dried beef for long-term storage or not. Eat well today and eat well tomorrow. Click the link in the description to get your Prepper beef with Prepper All Naturals, so you will always know what's for dinner.
Chip tracks, geoengineering. Is it possible to control this much weather? And if it is, the next obvious question is, can the food supply around the planet be controlled? And is this why we're seeing food get to such absurd prices? Because not only the purposeful destruction of food processing plants, the euthanasia of just umpteen animals and birds across the planet, and now the growing zones where we get our bread baskets are having, and these areas are struggling from unusual weather patterns, from droughts to massive floods, once in a 1,000-year flood every week. And it's just again and again and again, especially France, perfect example. Well, Ukraine's offline because of the war, but France this year, they're going to be down. I saw if you go to ag, let me find these guys here if you're on, let's see, Twitter, you can find them at Grain Stats. They were saying reduction, 35% of all the wheat in France is gone. So you're starting to look at these major producers. Germany not going to be doing much better, their energy woes. So we're starting to look at more food prices, at least in these forecasts as we come in now to we're in the harvest season. They are talking gargantuan losses across the planet in major bread baskets. Now you need to couple this then with all the losses of factories, and food is going to continue to get more expensive as we move forward. So is this the transition point where we suddenly get moved over to digital rationing cards? Because we see everything moving into the digital sphere. You got a digital ID, to have a digital this and digital central bank digital currencies. Although I think the tech, again, if you want to talk about size and scale, that tech is not deployable across the entire planet yet. And I will capital Y yet, but it will be at some point in the future. Not now. Definitely too early for that. So it's too early for digital IDs for most of the planet. You got to realize that most of the planet, like 60% of the planet, is not ready for that. They don't have the devices. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the electricity. In more developed nations, yeah, but I mean, is this more of a control thing? That's the next question to be asked. If it only can be deployable in Western advanced nations that have constant electricity and, 100% ownership of phones, especially, not flip phones, not like, you have to have an iPhone or some sort of, smartphone. So anyway, Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us talk about these things tonight. If you value free speech, which is seemingly being constricted by a python every time you turn and look at a news article, now they're talking about that they need to censor news out of North Carolina and Tennessee because, well, the people that are reporting it that are on the ground are making FEMA look bad. So we need to censor all the news coming out of everybody that's actually doing live broadcasts from their own backyard in destruction areas because they're making people look bad. So we need to censor it. This is what the whole thing is. They're like little nanny things on the playground. Like, we got to censor everybody. They can't tell the truth because we're in this election cycle. Now, if it was another year, I bet they wouldn't say it. But, for these senators and Congress critters from these states to come out and say, hey, we need to censor people for putting the truth out about how inefficient we are. Thank you, Revolution Radio, for letting us be on here. So if you consider free speech something, consider a donation right here to Revolution Radio. But Ransom, I digress. I was looking at the Euronext commitments for traders. Wheat and corn up. And you look at some of these projections and they look at percentages on what they think. So what I'm looking at is almost a vertical Loch Ness monster for 2024-25 on pricing for wheat. And wheat's used in an enormous amount of products. There's almost nothing that's not, wheat is predominant, and corn too, these two, but there's a lot of corn this year. But here we go. We got the corn sentiment. This is, sentiment just means the feeling. Is it going to go up or down? So if you see something in grain, you got to decode it back into easy English. So pricing sentiment. Okay, well, that just mean people feeling that it's going to go up or down. That's really all it means. Corn up, bullish. Soybean up, bullish. Wheat, bullish. Okay, you got three greens and one undecided for soy. The soy oil's going up, the soybean crush. So what does this tell you? These are the grain traders on the planet. They all in unison believe that Corn's going up, soybean oil is going up, and wheat is going up in price through the next month. So what do you think it's going to do? And so here's where we started getting into this, like, I wouldn't say doom loop, but more of a tailspin of problem, reaction, solution. I can absolutely understand that processing plants, facilities, farms, they can be taken down, they can be burned, they can be destroyed one by one by one. But look at that. Talking about scale, it has taken over 4 years on this planet to really make a dent in the food supply in terms of where they produce it, where they store it, and where they raise it. Also now, I don't know, this is the question for you, Ransom, riding on top here. I mean, how much control is there over weather systems over a grow zone where they could impact crop production in the field on, say, 200 million acres? That's a vast amount of land. 200 million acres, that's a lot. That's the total production around the world of anywhere that crops are grown. Doesn't include just wheat, does not cocoa, it's not just soybean, or it's not just palm oil. That's the total planet, 200 million acres. That's a lot. So can they control that and dial that in on individual areas enough where they can wire it in on every single little individual area, storm after storm, after front, to wipe out food production in the ground, because you see that there's been a concerted effort to wipe it out at the factory level. So food prices up for the rest of the year. That's a distant early warning here from the grain traders.
Well, you would think if you could destroy crops, you could also make ideal conditions for them.
Correcto. You hit it on the head. I was trying to thank you.
And, if you could do that, we would see a lot more evidence, so to speak, of certain multi-billionaire conglomerate international food companies making sure that their crops get perfect weather, or at least optimal conditions for the weather. But you don't actually see that. They go where the weather is going to be that way traditionally. They're going to grow zones. They're going to places that they know that the weather can be good. Like I said, I wasn't arguing that that there's not weather modification programs. I'm not arguing that they're not actually physically seeding clouds, trying to get them to rain more, or rain sooner or something like that. But it's really familiar. It's like Lord Raiden, God of the Thunder, and all of these other deities in older civilizations that were a humanoid figure that could manipulate the weather. Or if you're an X-Men fan, there was Storm, could control the weather. But we're still talking a little bitty area, even if you're talking about growing areas, like as far as a company growing a specific crop, is still small areas compared to the planet's surface area and ocean area. I mean, not just the land area, but the ocean area. It's really small. But if you go ahead and concede that your government can control the weather, then it's no different than ancient civilizations believing in a deity that could bring the rains or not bring the rains. The elite now have the same power that the Mayan chieftain or medicine person, or whatever you want to call it, their leader in spiritual things and also mathematics, and also the other sciences. But still, they knew things, like eclipses or things like that. And I'm sure if you had good weather for a couple of years, there was a guy standing up there taking credit for it, and that same guy was hacking people to pieces when droughts came that were totally seemingly out of the control of them or anyone else, being men. So they would blame it on the gods, and like, you're giving the government that power now by claiming that not only can man in general shape the atmosphere and the climate on Earth, other than littering it up and killing living things, because remember scale too. Living things are really small things compared to the earth. Man has total power over that. So what does man really have power over? Well, we have power over the other animals. We have power over the plants that live across the thin film on top of planet Earth, because we can physically control areas and make sure things grow or don't grow there as far as where. We have control over that. And we have electric and a small amount of electromagnetism knowledge and power, and we have splitting the atom power. But the main thing that man has power over is, like I said, the animals and the plants. We have dominion over the food. And it's really easy for men, i.e. corporations, since they're one and the same now. A person is, a corporate entity and vice versa. They can control the food output, and they can make sure that things happen or don't happen. But controlling the weather is like, rain dancing, no offense, or any other of, belief systems that believe that somebody is coming down and controlling the rain and they have power over nature and the supernatural. Now, if you're willing to believe that your government is that powerful over you, then of course you can believe in all of that stuff, and you can be an outroverted person that believe things just happen to them rather than them doing things in reality, and they believe that reality just happens to them, and there's nothing they can do about it because that's the way reality is, versus the other mentality of manifesting things, freedom, free will. All of those things do not fit in with the idea that there's some little group of elite people that are now taxing me for my breath because they are claiming power over nature as far as creating the weather or preventing people from destroying the climate. I mean, think about that too. That's what they're also claiming, is that we have it within our power to individually micromanage each human on the earth so that we don't build up carbon on the planet and all die. Even though that we're at a low level of carbon dioxide right now, historically, especially when it involves greening and multiple species upon the earth. We're not in a good place for that. We're actually on the verge of going in the wrong direction. Now, if that's terraforming, I think that they may have a little power over that, because we realize mathematical, things about nature and other stuff, like the people that worry that the United States is producing too much carbon. I was curious about this one day too, so I found out how much a single tree sequesters, and then I did the math on how many trees are in the United States, and then eventually you come out with a number of cubic tons that just trees, not plants of other kinds, but just trees, sequester, and it's equivalent to the amount that man supposedly is making through industry and ranching. All they're doing is throwing a con on humans that they and only they have dominion over nature, and that includes, evidently, but not limited to, the genetics of each individual species on the planet. That they have power over. Genetic pollution, genetic engineering, chemical pollution, and chemical engineering, those things we have power over. But if they can convince you that they control the weather, then they have put themselves in a pedestal position where they are a deity, and therefore you have no rights, right? And then they can decide for you everything: what you eat, what you think, where you move on this earth, how you interact with the rest of the human domain based on behavior that they dictate. This is no different than a religion, and that's why people point out that science has become a religion. Instead of testing facts and duplicating results and looking at the big picture, we now, kind of singularly fixate on a specific topic and then manipulate the idea until people comply.
Do not comply. See, that's another thing too. It's so simple, and you look at different, I guess, civilizations across time, or societies. And India just said no back when the British were in control. No, I'm not going to work. It collapsed in British. The sun did set on the British Empire. You know what I mean? But you shouldn't be ashamed to say rain dancing, because that is these rain dancing ceremonies. That's part of our cultural heritage. That is part of us as a collective using our sounds and our vibrations for manifestation. Now, you can look at it in many ways, in shapes and forms, but even now in this world, you're not even allowed. So this is the thing that also I find really nefarious and very dark, that because you're of a different race or ethnic background, you're not allowed to talk about any other race or ethnic backgrounds past. But wait a minute, that is called human civilization, humanity, our record going back as a species. So look how quickly it's been so divided. In like the last 5 years, you're not allowed to talk about anything. You can't talk about anything without being in the incorrect position, because you were not in that part of history historically, and you have no right to talk about it because you're not from that birth lineage, from that same village. There's a prediction that even in the future, within the same ethno groups, they're going to start saying, well, you can't talk about that tradition because you weren't from that place. Watch it. That's the next step. They're going to start dividing within the ethnic groups. So they're doing a good job right now, like depending on what your skin tone is, out of this human race that is connected by the great creator and the divine spark of consciousness of all time, space, dimension, whatever name you give that. We are all connected to that source. We are all part of it. We are all from it. And see, once you start dividing that, we get into this world that we're there now. So I'm very happy that there were ceremonies that collectively, using vibration and frequency coming from the human resonant vocal cord, the vocal box, they were trying to invoke something in this dimensional realm by using the collective. And that shows the possibility of it being possible. Because if it wasn't possible and it never worked, they sure wouldn't be doing it thousands of years after the next 1,000 years, because they did it for thousands of years. So it must have worked some effect, or else you wouldn't keep doing it if there was no effect after multi-thousands of years. Well, let me see. I'm going to put the seed in the soil. If it didn't grow in that place, you're going to move it to a different place. And you're going to try a different season, and you're going to try a different amount of water on it. It's the same thing using vocalizations. You see these monks in the Himalayas. There's all endless stories about, and in ancient Egypt too, using resonance to lift objects, to make them weightless by finding that counteracting sine wave of its element to turn it into a weightless object. Horns were used many a times in history. Again, it all comes down to this frequency of vibration, exactly what Tesla talks about. So imagine because the rain dance, these ceremonies, they make you think like it's like 10 people sitting around a circle somewhere in a fire at night, which is, I think, the very wrong way to look at it. Think of it was thousands, tens of thousands of people. Imagine the power that we would have using resonance, frequency, and vibration on. You go into a stadium where there's 100,000 people cheering for a football team or a soccer team. The power in that is incredible. Now, everybody has their different cheers and their different thing, but imagine if everybody was focused on a single output with a single frequency. And everybody had tuned their voices, and maybe there was voice training further back, because I went to Nepal and India both, and I'd stumbled across and walked past some windows where people were training their voices and singing in these different, mantra chants where they could hold the same syllables and the same frequency in their voice for a long time. And it was the most, it just stopped. You could feel your chakras open. You could just feel if you believe there's chakras and different energy centers in the body, you could feel them opening up. So why would it not be possible where you'd have 10,000 people focused to a certain part of the sky using their voice to channel vibration to create something out of that layer of sky? Would it be? It would be no different than cloud seeding, would it be? But maybe it would be, because you're creating it through the frequency, not riding on top of it by putting a layer of carbon black, a layer of silver iodide on top of it. But I want to come back into what you were talking about there, registering the trees, because I was invited to go to this agricultural conference sponsored by the University of Tennessee in Athens, Tennessee. I was like, oh, it's a long drive, but Ryan went down there. All right, so Ryan went, our other, he comes on as a guest sometimes here on the Civilization Cycle podcast. Ryan attended that, and they were talking about carbon credit registry for farm owners. And I thought that's really interesting. So I ended up talking to the gentleman in charge of this farm registry or forest registry. So I delved into it, spoke with him for like 2 hours, called him a couple more times. He sent me a bunch of documents. I read through them. So this is for ag in Tennessee, by the way. So they're paying farmers not to use their land. And they're paying them a certain amount per year, depending on the acreage and depending on the utilization. So if you decide not to farm next year, obviously your field's going to go fallow, and it's just going to turn into a big old field. And you're going to get overhead high grasses the first year. And the second year, you're going to get a bunch of saplings that go to 8 feet. And the third year, you're going to get 15-foot tall pines and a whole bunch of gum trees and all this kind of stuff that we battle every single year to bush hog down, because we got to keep our field clear. And if we missed one rotation and the things, now we need to go into the chainsaw first and cut them down and then run over them. But they are paying people not to use their land anymore. And then depending on how much it was like $5 to $7 per acre if you just let your fields go fallow, but you had to have a 100-acre registry on that. And they were paying, you have to see the different payout methods and the contracts for how long you would not use your land. Okay, but here, because some of these family farms, 200, 400, 500 acres, and if they're not going to use it but get $7 an acre per month not to farm their lands, they're like, okay, that's a pretty good deal. There's no inputs into it. Think about that. You got 500 acres, you're getting $7 an acre per month not to use your land. There's no running costs. That'll definitely pay your property taxes. You got no machinery costs. Okay, I want to keep that 500 acres and just leave it there. That's $3,500 a month. I'm not going to farm it anymore. I'll give it off to the kids. We were going to sell it for a neighborhood anyway, whatever. Recurring income for them. But here was the most interesting part, and this is where it comes back, Ransom, because I have some forest property. So their whole thing was on a 20-acre minimum on a registry for forests. Now, once you register, you got to read that super small fine print at the bottom, because once you registered your forest into the program, you were no longer allowed to utilize your forest, which means if I would have put my forest on the registry, I would not be allowed on my own property to walk back and harvest the trees that had fallen on the forest floor for firewood. Like all those trees, all those oak trees that came down in that last storm, that Hurricane Helene here, under the guise of the contractual agreement, I couldn't go back on my own land and harvest those trees and cut them up and use them for firewood. You're off the land, and it's a 20-year commitment. So what they do is once you sign up for the program, you're getting on a carbon registry at that point. And this is the thing where this interface comes in. So it's not the state of Tennessee that's actually paying you. They're out on the global carbon market, pulling in offers for your land. And it changes every month and every year. So it's not just the government of Tennessee says, oh, David's farm over here, he's putting 20 acres of forest. He won't go back on there. We're going to rewild it, whatever. They're on the global market looking for carbon pricing. They're trying to take the overage of what they're giving you in the contract and keeping the difference between what they're finding for a higher price out on the global market. And I'm like, you guys here in Tennessee are trying to scrape the difference between what you're offering farmers. This is their profit model. This is how they're trying to do it. And I said, well, I was kind of interested. I said, well, how do you know what my carbon sequestration is? And they go, oh, that's real easy. We will bring a team of, they call them like geofencers, out and they will run scans on your land, basically LiDAR. They'll go over the forest. And obviously everything's already been cataloged. So they take a tree density, and through that tree density, they would know exactly how much CO2 your mixed forest can sequester per year. And then they take that and they say, all right, well, this acre here will take 5 tons per year. And then they will go out on an open market and buy it at a higher cost per ton as a carbon offset credit. And they'll keep the difference for what they would offer me on a contract. So maybe they would give me, $22 a month for a single acre. Or maybe they'll give me $102 a month for an acre, depends on, just throwing some easy, okay, 10 or 100. And then they would go out somewhere and find it for 112 or 115. And they would sell me the contract back. They would pay me back through the overage that they bought on a contract, futures contract on the global carbon market. I'm like, y'all are bringing this way down here into the farming country and these farmers don't know what is going on. I was just very blessed and lucky enough to understand cryptocurrency and lucky enough to understand what the carbon market was and how they're doing it on the blockchain to put these pieces together. Because if you didn't understand all of these different ideas within it, you wouldn't get how, even in the smallest of farming communities here in East Tennessee, they are bringing this globalist agenda in here and bringing their farms onto a global market. Now, here's the thing on the global market. I am wondering if, through my contractual agreement, if I had signed it, if I broke the agreement, then what penalty would I incur? Would they be able to confiscate my land, and my land would be held by then some World Bank or something? This is what I could never find the answer to that. I asked high and low. I said, okay, what if I sign the contract and then I break the contract and I decide that I want to use my land again before 20-year period was finished? And what's the penalty for that? But I never could find the answer. Nobody has that answer. That's the scary thing too, is it's easy to get into the program. Easy. As long as you got 20 acres, that's the minimum. You have to check by state though. So at least here in Tennessee, East Tennessee is 20 acres on the minimum. But how do you get out of that? And isn't that just terrible that they're skimming where the farmers here are struggling anyway, because prices really haven't risen per bushel for farmers, but all their input costs have gone up. The diesel's up. Damn, machine parts are so expensive now. Tires are ridiculous. Workers, hard to find. They don't even know what they're doing. It's just like you got to train them day by day. Nobody wants to show up to work, and they all want like $50 an hour. Dude, you're a farmhand. No $50. 15. That's it. 20 maximum if you have some skill. And these farmers are struggling to find work and get their machines repaired and keep everything running. And it's just so expensive with the fertilizers now and the herbicides. I don't believe in using those. I don't use them, but a lot of farms do. But they're being put out of business, almost driven up by the costs. Yet when they're selling into, like I say, the futures market here, if they were going to run to Chicago or something, nothing. It's still, the prices are ridiculously low. So the offer is, prices are so low on the world market for your corn or for your wheat, but your input costs have gone 3 times higher since 2019. You're losing money now. Your only possible option to keep your land for your family is to take it offline and put it into this carbon registry program. And it'll pay you every month not to farm. And you can just chill out and make trails through your land and enjoy your land. This is where it's gone to, even out here in East Tennessee. I thought this place would be well immune from all of this, but it is not. It is front and center. And everywhere you go in these really small farming communities, they're trying to entice farmers not to farm. In England, it's really gotten it's gotten well ahead there. They're and in the Netherlands too. So it's not just those countries over there. It is these counties right here. And it is a global agenda, and it is everywhere. So if you're wondering why your food prices are, continuing to increase, and they shall continue and increase. This is why. This is why. Ransom, I'll turn it back to you. I kind of just,
You're
I mean,
making
I could
me
talk
hungry.
about food and stuff. There's a couple comments coming in here. Let's see. Nicotine is a nutrient in all nightshade families of veggies, especially eggplants, tomatoes, and potatoes. That is so true. And by the way, I grow my own
Celery.
tobacco because I make my own natural pesticides. Now, I understand the neonicotinoids, and I try not to spray when I know the bees are around. I always will hit my tree or my garden before it flowers because I don't want to interfere with the bees. And also, that's why I like grape and cherry tomatoes so much. Okay, and by the way, the cherry tomatoes, you're going to get a way higher output than if you're growing those big like Romas. You're going to have far less disease on them, and they're endless for like 4 months. Cherry tomatoes are the way to go. Definitely, that out of me growing, that's all we grow now. We only grow cherry tomatoes, and we buy from the Amish in the beginning of the year. It's like $3 a plant. We got trellises and all kind of stuff, and we buy like 20 of those. And at the end of the year, we save some seeds, and now we're starting our own after that first year. Cherry tomatoes are going to be your best bang for the buck. If you're going to go tomatoes, go cherry tomatoes. High value, endless production, disease resistance, and I don't know. I can't speak highly enough about that. But Ransom, I'll let you get back, man. I'm sorry, I'm just hogging the microphone here.
Nah, you were making me hungry. I was thinking about all that.
Yeah, I know, man. And there's the snackables too. They're the best snacks. People don't like to cut open a big old, like beefsteak tomato and just nibble on it. But these little cherry tomatoes, you got all different kinds of apples, pears, and chocolates and different flavors, man. They're super good.
Yeah, and you ever wonder why people that eat all of that, eggplant and celery and all that stuff with nicotine in it, they're not having withdrawals from that plant, even though they're eating in the same substance that people are, millions of people are addicted to? It's kind of strange. Just saying. I don't know. Maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist. I noticed a lot of people getting mad about some of the stuff I said, but which is funny because on other topics, I'm the conspiracy theorist, right? Because I do believe that technology is ahead about 50 to 100 years in DARPA research and, private hands, and in the there is a breakaway, but just not to the extent that they have that much power. And I think that's literally why they haven't made their move to come out as gods. But if you pay attention to, like all of the movements, the transhuman movement, just government in general, that is the niche that they're trying to take. It's that technologic feudalism that we've talked about before. And the ultimate power over you is once they get their greedy little hooks into your private property and prevent you from growing your own food. Because once they do that, they totally do have people enslaved, because you have to go to their source of food to get nutrition. And, we don't even want to get into the topics about food and medicine out there because then you find the real conspiracies, the ones that will get you absolutely shut off of any platform, get your videos banned, get your channel terminated. And I've touched on those subjects, and almost all of them involve genetic manipulation and nanotechnology. I can say
the Chimera's return.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, this is a weird idea that came across my mind there, is that supposedly, and I haven't verified this, there's some law out there that allows governments to make human animal chimeras as long as they don't pass a certain percentage threshold of it being human. Now, I don't know this to be fact because that's out of the conspiracy theory realm, so I haven't verified it. Like, I haven't found a law that actually says that. But if so, that would be crazy, because guess what? None of us on this planet are 100% any species. We call ourselves a species, but we're in fact like the mix of probably 12 plus different hominids in the last 50 to 70,000 years. And that's remarkable that we're that, but that's what gets into the craziness of some topics that you're not allowed to talk about, because there is science-based programs that people are unaware of based on those topics. There actually is genetic differences between people around the world, and most of those are based on the amount or percentage of archaic DNA that you possess and from which archaic DNA source you got it from. So, in other words, if you have a specific archaic DNA strain or genes that are active in your exact mix of the admixture, you can be targeted by synthetic or created agents. We'll just put it that way. And this is a brave new world we're about to go in that people just don't understand, that while you're looky-looing about the weather and whether or not they're the god of rain or not, they're doing some pretty awesome things on another end of reality, and that is genetic manipulation, creation, and destruction. All three of those things are happening in the world you live in. So regardless of the weather, things are going to be different in the decades and centuries to come, just based on that alone. For one thing, most human people in the Western world, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, are not eating a diet of normal human food that you would have been eating 100 years ago in any place on the planet. And that's a fact. Things are being manipulated at such a speed that even the conspiracy theorists and the fact hunters are having trouble keeping up with the changes. They're happening exponential. The fields of anthropology and genetics are throwing history on its head. So things are not only intellectually, scholarly, technologically, I would say spiritually, but all of those things are indeed about to reset. And there's a lot of manipulation going on to keep people paying attention to subjects, factoids, or topics that absolutely just don't matter when it comes to your place in the universe here on this planet that provides life for you in the form of nutrition that grows on the earth. And that is actually the war that we're facing in the coming times, is whether or not that you as a human being on this planet of any different variety have the right to grow food on private property and choose which food you eat. And the topic of medication and medical treatments goes along that same line. And any freedom-loving person would believe that anybody, as long as it doesn't hurt or violate someone else's rights, you have the right to do or think that kind of thing. Like, when you go down the line of conspiracy theory, like you said, you can't discount certain things because they're not provable at the same time. It's just that if there's no data there, it's less likely. But spiritual things have been happening on this planet for a long time, long before they came up with the idea that they control the weather. And that is where it's going. Don't kid yourself. First, they have to convince you that man overall is somehow, telling the sun what to do and the earth what to do. And once they convinced you of that, then they can convince you that they are protecting you from some kind of outside, force that you can't prove or really measure in any real way, which would be a constant, ever-changing climate on Earth, which we've always had. But they're going to convince you that they saved you, and therefore you should labor for them. And, speaking of the election, I've been hearing some crazy ideas being put out there.
Hey, go easy on Ransom. Go easy, man. They're hitting channels talking about these things right now.
Oh, I was going to just talk about the income tax thing there.
Yeah, go with that. I'm curious what you've been hearing about that.
Well, you have one kind of candidate that supports 87,000 more IRS agents, and they endorse her. And then on the other side, you got a guy that's wanting to get rid of tax on tips, get rid of tax on overtime, get rid of the federal income tax, and replace it with tariffs from countries that have uneven or bad deals, basically, where we're getting taken as far as money. And that they would pay for the programs that they're taking the income tax for now. And that kind of rhetoric and that kind of talk, I don't know, reminds me of another president that was talking about taking that same power out of the hands of the people that control that power, which would be, we'll just skip that. In other words, this also would be a form of putting the power of the money back into the hands of the people and less in the hands of the treasury that seems to be beholden to the private central banking cartel. I'll leave it at that. That pretty was like right into it. So I don't know. That other president was talking about gold and silver and started with silver and wanted our treasury to make it. And well, we all know how that turned out in 1963.
Yeah, you kind of reversed the clock there to the formation of the Federal Reserve, didn't you, back in 1913? Now, for anybody out there that would like to take a small trip in history with us, if I bring you back to, say, 1840, 1849, we were on a bimetallic system, meaning gold and silver were used dually in the United States as money, convertible for those green notes that were from different banks, issued by different banks. There was no central bank. That each bank issued its own notes back then, or a state would issue notes. So you could deposit your silver and it would be equivalent to that note, but you could go to another bank that was held by the same corporation and put that piece of paper on the counter and then get your silver back. But that changed. We went to a gold-backed currency, and everybody's super excited about gold-backed currencies. But what's interesting is the BRICS talking about coming back to a bimetallic or trimetallic system again, which was the original. The original. When we come back in time, it was always gold, it was always silver, used in unison. Like platinum and palladium, those weren't used back during the Roman era. And Ransom, I said use that's one slide there about the gold-silver ratio through time. And if you could throw that on the screen for me. And I wanted to throw out, I just, Thomas, thank you for sending me this. Just got a new, let's see, repeaters up here. This is in Bakersville, North Carolina. Thursday evenings from 8 to 9, that's 20 to 2100 hours on the 40-meter band. You can check in, listen, communicate with any of those sending messages further afield on 7.220 or 7.214. I'll repeat that again. For those of you looking to make contact for somebody around Bakersfield, North Carolina, they have a forward operating base near that area that has contact into the repeater network that is functional near Bakersville, North Carolina. Every Thursday night from 2000 to 2100 hours on the 40-meter band, 7.220 and 7.214 for those of you who want to check in. And that was a public service announcement there for anybody listening that wants to give some ideas of how you can help if you want to find somebody up there that can guide you in the right direction. If you want to volunteer with Grindstone Ministries or somebody that's up in East Tennessee, please contact me. I have a fair few contacts that I can definitely get you in contact with somebody immediately if you have skills and you can absolutely help somebody here. Not a problem. Ransom, did you find, are you on that chart there? Let me see here.
Yes.
All right. So gold to silver ratio through history. This is an incredibly important thing. And as we go through this chart, everybody, I want you to try to think of a significant historical event that changed society or collapsed civilization, or civilization began out of one of these eras in history. So if we go to 3200 BC, we're looking at the Roman Empire, or excuse me, the Egyptians, my bad, and the Medes. So we got the 1-to-3 ratio, or the 1-to-9 ratio in ancient Egypt is 1-to-2. So that means today, I don't know, let me put it in perspective here. Gold closed at an all-time record high at $2,800 per ounce. So at a 2-to-1 ratio, that means 1 ounce of gold would equal 2 ounces of silver. So do the math with me. 2,800 divided by 2 is how much? Like $1,400 an ounce for silver during the Egyptian time at today's gold price. And then if we come into more latter Egypt in the later dynasties, for a better term, it was 1-to-10. So if we're talking about $2,800 gold, then your ounce of silver would be $280. And then we come up into Plato, obviously finding Solon's work and the priests in Egypt, speaking of that, talking about the Atlanteans sinking, but it still says 1 to 12. Then we come to Greece, and I'll ask you, look through these chapters of history. 1 to 15, Rome, 1 to 15. Caesar's time, it decreases. Why did it, and this is my whole thing is, why did it decrease? So if the Roman era was 15 to 1, 15 ounces of silver equals an ounce of gold, and then at Caesar's time and ancient Egypt, what you consider the dynastic, like Khufu and these types of pharaohs around the time, Khufu, that was 9 to 1. And Caesar's time at 8 to 1. So those are very similar, although they're 2,000, say 700 years difference in time. Those ratios are nearly the same. Now, why does it widen the ratio in Plato's time and the Greek and the Roman Empire times, early Roman Empire? See, there's some variance, and I'm wondering what the trigger is to pull the gold-silver ratio closer, and then why it widens out. But then we come into, see, there's a giant skip in time here. From Claudius in 40 AD, and then suddenly you're at 1200 AD in England, 11 to 1 ratio. And then we've got Italy, Spain, China. It's always like 5 to 1, 10 to 1. France, 1600s, 1700s, and then Clown World, 91 to 1. But I bought some silver way back and it was 121 to 1. And silver was like $13 an ounce. So I'm wondering, think about this just for Clown World time here. If we're at 91 to 1 right now, and we come back anywhere remotely close to, and I'll even choose the highest one at 15 to 1, you're still talking at least a 7x increase on the silver price if prices just stayed stable and they removed and coagulated back to the historical gold to silver ratio. Like, just say nothing ever changed. Let's say the gold price holds the same, and we'll bump it up to $3,000. That's an easy number to work with, $3,000 an ounce. And it goes from 91 to 1, and it reverts down to 15 or 1 or 10 to 1. I mean, you're looking at $250 to $300 silver prices per ounce just based on if prices stay the same and gold does not increase, and the historical gold to silver ratios come back to some normal. I mean, if you don't hold those metals now, you're out. You can't find an ounce of silver anymore for under 37. I would encourage you to try to find $36 to $37 silver. I would think you'd have a very difficult time. 38, yeah, $40 easy. But those times of buying silver for, $15, $20, $30, those times are over. You're not going to find, in my opinion, silver for under $30 ever again in this market that runs to its peak with the reset and it comes down within our lifetime. I'm not sure the duration on that. Maybe Ransom, you could give me, what do you think your time frame from now through the peak back down into some normalcy, the shift of the ages for a term in the economy? I don't know. I don't have those answers, man. That's what I'm asking.
I don't know. I would imagine once food and all these other things become, really hard to get, that the value, at least for taking gold, will lessen, where you won't get as much out of it if you are trying to buy things from it. You would have to hold it until, things are stable. And then, of course, you return back to that good ratio where you can buy a lot with gold. I was just watching this thing about, Cortez and all of the gold sequestering that they did. 80 tons just got put on the market there. And according to your graph there, it was like 1 to 10 still then, right? Spain, 1497. So right after this, they got 80 tons of gold. What do you think that did to the world market of gold at that time? At least in Europe, a bunch of people. And then you got to think about this. What keeps happening to all the gold, right? Accumulation of gold peaks and then it disappears, and then accumulative gold, they accumulate it all again and it peaks and then it disappears. Somebody somewhere is putting it away and it's not counted in the circulation. I mean, otherwise, when people find a new gold, of course that would manipulate the rarity of it. So they keep disappearing it to keep it in value. So it seems like even though some people have, unimaginable amounts of gold, like maybe the royal family and the Vatican and some other entities, they just hide it all. They hide it all and they manipulate the system. But one thing stays the same throughout time, and that gold is the only, besides, like the other rarity metals and diamonds, jewels, things like that, the only thing that has retained its monetary value throughout time. I mean, there's no doubt in that. And plus, now we're at an age where there's education and knowledge out there that shows you that gold can be used for a lot more things than just monetary value, right? So as far as a technological thing, we're now in an era that needs to consume gold. But the question is where is it and who has all of it? Because if you estimate like the amounts of gold in the past, you would wonder, where is that gold today?
The Anunnaki have taken it off planet, man, you conspiracy theorist. They're going to use it for monatomic gold to reinforce their atmosphere. And if you don't believe that, I'm never talking to you ever again, because you just don't believe what I believe. This is kind of the world we're heading into. But everybody, thank you so much tonight for listening to our conversation. Remember, we have civilizationcycle.com live right now. You can listen to some of the previous shows there. And if you scroll down, you can enter your email. We'll send you out tonight's show notes of things we talked about so we can jar your memory. And also those are talking points, and then you can do more research on some of the ideas that we were spinning around through the evening here. But I'm curious, is it possible to transmutate another substance? Okay, so our technology is very advanced now. We can control magnetic fields in chambers. We can control plasma in chambers. Is it possible now for us to take one atomical structure, ionize it, put it under heat, pressure, different magnetic field state, put it into a vacuum, magnetize it, and rip it to shreds and reassemble it into something else?
Ooh.
We are talking the atomic level here. So, Ransom, do you think it's possible to transmutate another substance into gold? And it's not as valuable as it could be?
Yes, I can tell you as a matter of fact and record that you can turn lead into gold, and they've already done that at some nuclear power plants. It's called nuclear transmutation. It's just stripping one element and making it stick to another element, and we absolutely can do that. The problem is it takes so much energy to get a little amount of gold that, again, it's like scale. Yes, we do have the power of the Philosopher's Stone in the form of nuclear transmutation. But hey, this answers a lot of questions for us in other, areas, at least in theory, like why is the Earth bigger than it used to be and things like that. Well, it would seem that at the center of toroid fields, it's very possible that nuclear transmutation is happening. In other words, some material is being created at the Z pinch, I guess, of the toroid field, and that material has to react with the other material around it, and then you get new elements or more of an element, and that's nuclear transmutation.
Yeah, what if you're using some Victor Schauberger principles combined with Nikola Tesla's atmospheric energy harvesting, because the Victor Schauberger vortex principles could meet those two in the middle at that Z pinch, combined with limitless power that could be scaled up. These two men in history have maybe given us the clue, because you're right, that Z pinch, that's where stars form on those lines. I've seen a lot of really good pictures lately, and been watching a lot of thunderbolts I've been on a thunderbolt watching fest. So Andy Hall, you and I, we got to get on the interview. Thanks for writing my email back. I was talking with Andy for a minute, talking about dendritic ridges and different kind of shockwave patterns seen from the Judicula rock over in North Carolina. And yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, if you can create the Z pinch on the zeta pinch using limitless power combined with Schauberger principles, that would create the seed point right there where atoms could come into existence or be bent or, as you say, transmuted from one substance to another. And frequency and vibration, Dalvanius, you are correct. We just need to get the Rubik's Cube of our world and Matrix hologram working together in unity. Until next week, thank you for joining us. It's DuByne right here. Ransom Godwin signing off.
Thank you for listening to Revolution.